Okay, we're joined by Zach from Hacker Time Rugby. Zach, so good to see you again. It's been a while. How you doing?
It has been a while, Rich, but now the All Blacks are back. I'm sort of slowly making my way back. I'm doing well, thanks, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, if you haven't been over to Hacker Time Rugby, Zach does some great stuff, particularly on the All Blacks, which is why I've asked you to come on because I waffle on
Mhm.
about England enough. I try and stay up to date with New Zealand as much as possible, but not as much as you. So if it's okay, I'm going to chuck some questions at you, Zach, and see what you think about the first ever game under Razor. What sort of All Blacks do you think we're going to see? Because we've only seen one game, of course.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot's been made about sort of dive into the major talking point, which is around their ability to get around the rush defense. So I think that's going to be a real area of focus. I think the selections he's made, particularly Peter Feta at the back there, it really does offer a little bit of, we saw a little bit of late footwork against Ben Earl to sort of get
Sure did.
around to get around the rush defense. And I think that's going to be a real focus area. But Razor's very much in that Crusaders mold as well. So supported by Jason Ryan, obviously, and, real forward focus. I think we're going to see quite an exciting brand under Razor, where the South Africans are sort of moving to expand, sort of laterally in terms of their attack. I think we're going to see, a really good mix from the All Blacks. And he's just a real smart cookie, a student of the game. So, he will have taken a lot of lessons out of that previous game. I think we'll see improvements there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely getting a win is always good, isn't it? I mean, that
Yeah.
could have been a loss, but certainly that boost of the first win. Let's just go out for the big question then. Are the All
Mhm.
Blacks going to win in Eden Park yet again on Saturday?
It's hard to say as an All Blacks fan and looking at Eden Park, it's hard to say anything but yes. But I do have my reservations. I have a couple of doubts. So if we look at that first game, we look at where, the All Blacks struggled. Obviously, lineout's a real focus area, and we have to tip our hat to Maro Toji, what a game he had there. Just sort of generally around the park. I thought the All Blacks had a lot of really good success at the breakdown. And I'd probably describe England's performance more as inaccurate. I think there are sort of quite a few penalties given away, I thought, there at the breakdown. Um, what I think, where I'm really concerned though, is the 9-10 access, let's say.
I'd literally
So,
written the next thing, discussion point players 9 and 10. I hadn't written any
yep,
other position. So that's
yep,
interesting. Go on then, nine. Let's
yeah.
talk
So,
nine. It's
yeah, let's talk nine.
Christie this
So,
time.
yeah, and I think what we saw under TJ in that first game was a lot more of a settled head, a bit more of a temperament for international rugby, let's say, whereas Christie's style very much is to sort of he loves a box kick, which I think is coming under a lot of criticism from the New Zealand public and has done for some time. But he's just a little bit limited in some of his lateral play, I've noticed, and others have noticed. So it is somewhat limiting. Obviously, at this level at international rugby, you really need game managers, and you contrast that to Alex Mitchell, who, seemed to sort of have great lateral movement in terms of his running up
He
and
had a good
finding a
game. He had
man,
a good game.
obviously, kicking. But it just showed a sort of contrast in styles, I thought, between how Christie plays and how, Alex Mitchell is very much in the mold. I thought of an international style scrum half. So that's a problem. I think Christie just hasn't really sort of found. He's certainly the most of the experienced of the next nines. So
For
it's
sure, he's
important
got
that he
the
does.
experience. Would you
Yeah,
have
so it's
played him though?
important
Would
that he
you
does
have picked
start.
Christie?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, do you roll the dice on a debutant, or do you or do you play the incumbent? You probably got to back the experience. But I just think that Kiwi fans kind of need to temper their expectations around this team a little bit. I think between 9 and 10, they're actually a combination that needs a lot more starting experience for the All Blacks. I mean, Mackenzie, if we just sort of pivot into 10, he's almost 50 caps for the All Blacks.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
how many of those games has he started at 10 against some of the top teams? Not that many, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so he's
Yeah,
another one
England
that I
managed
just think,
to they managed to rattle him a little bit, didn't they, at times? They managed
yeah,
to get to him.
100%. Yep, 100%. So, yeah, for me, those are two areas of concern. And I think they will come right. Obviously, Mackenzie, for the time being, is given the keys to the castle. So he needs time there. He needs time to really build that sort of experience as a starting international 10.
Do you think he's under threat, or is he gonna get this season, if you like? He's gonna get the rugby championship, and
I
then
think they're
they're
going
gonna
to
see.
persevere. Yeah, I
Okay.
think they're going to persevere with him. And I think if you look at sort of the 10, 15 Bowden Barrett off the bench sort of combination, I think that's the best of that group in terms of that makeup. So Pedofeta offers so much at the back there. And McKenzie is sort of that player that if you can just sort of develop more of that international test match level temperament and game management, I mean, he's really just adding that additional sort of strength to his bow, that additional skill.
Yeah.
Because we know what he can do with the ball in hand.
So 9 and 15, are they just keeping those shirts warm a little bit for Roygaard and Will Jordan? Or is that too easy to say?
I think it's probably right. I think that's probably right. I think between Roygaard, TJ I thought played really, really well as well. So,
Yeah, yeah.
he'll
How old
be
is
sort of
TJ
right in
now?
that conversation. Yeah, he's kicking on. He'd be mid-30s, I'd say,
Been
or
around for a
or
long
close
time,
to.
hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. So there's going to be a real battle there. I think ultimately Roygaard surpasses him. And I mean, there's 14 games this season, so there's an opportunity to have a good look at both of them. McKenzie, I think, gets the keys to the castles, obviously at 10. Pedofeta, I think he is building his experience, but ultimately we'll see Will Jordan there once he's fit and ready.
Yeah, yeah. Are they expecting him to be ready for the Rugby Championship?
I haven't kept across his current fitness levels, to be honest. So I know he was expected to be back at some stage during the internationals. So whether it's
Yeah.
the start or sometime during the rugby championship,
Mm. But I guess
that
the team we're seeing now is going to be pretty much the Rugby Championship team, I'm guessing. Yeah. Is there anyone else to come in?
no, I think that's the majority of it. So yeah, I think this is yeah, I mean, so you've highlighted once obviously Will Jordan gets fit, he'll likely slot back in. But this team, I think it's relatively settled. A number of the combinations have been established and are there. Obviously, light at 9 and 10, as we've mentioned, but experienced in most other areas.
So go on then. So you've said your concerns, but what about real areas of strength that you think New Zealand can turn up the pressure on England and everyone else?
I think the scrum, obviously, a lot to be made about the scrum. So I'm really interested in sort of talking to you about Ollie Baxter, which we'll do over on my channel.
Okay,
I'm
Finn
really interested in
Baxter.
how he will. Sorry, Finn Baxter.
We've got some Ollies as
Really
well.
interested in him. You got Ollie's, and there's been a lot made about Ethan de Groot's sort of body position and how he's sort of going into scrums. But yeah, I do think that they have the edge there, certainly at scrum time and with the scrum rotation.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the All Blacks
So
do.
those six props, would you just stick with how it was? Do you get the new guy in? Is it Tosi? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him in. Because you look at sort of between him and Mighty Williams, and you look at that size that you can really bring in off the
Scary, isn't
bench,
it?
and oh,
Considering
it's
him and Williams, neither were playing, neither were needed. That's
yeah, neither were
ridiculous, isn't it?
needed.
We
Yeah,
would take any of those.
yeah,
That'll be
and
fine.
it's sort of this mold of these number eights that are converting to prop. So you still got to remember they've got great footwork, they've got
Yeah,
skills, they've got great work around the breakdown, and sort of higher work rates for these types of props that you would expect of this size. So
yeah.
yeah, a
That
lot of
front row
exciting.
looks really. I can't wait to see them go against South Africa, of course, in the Rugby
Oh,
Championship. That's going to be ridiculous.
yeah, I
Second row,
agree.
are they a little light on depth beyond Tupelutu and Barrett?
100% they are. And obviously Tupovai, he's another player that's been in the system for a while, and another quite experienced player at international level, but you would say he's always sort of hung below the top performers. So there is real concern there at lock, and the depth beyond that is just
Who would be fourth
it's
choice
not
for
great.
you?
I mean, Josh Lords has been sort of in and around the system, and
He's been around.
he's won Walker Liawere, who played for the Hurricanes, but you're really sort of testing the depth at that stage. There's just not a lot behind these three. Sort of, you can add Josh Lords in there, but behind that, there's not a lot of depth.
Yeah, and have they got that balance of the back row right? Because Finau has had the first crack. He looks like a proper six.
Yeah.
Papali'i, Surveyor, is that the right combo?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Luke Jacobson, so I would be considering him ahead of Dalton Papali'i, or
So
at
you'd
least
be
I
playing
would say
him
that
at
number
seven, would
seven.
you? As a big,
Yes, I'd
big
consider
seven.
that. Yeah, at 7. So I'd be considering that jersey as
Okay.
an open jersey. Probably did have a good game.
He did.
I've just found he's always sort of at international level. And look, contrasting his performances at Super Rugby level versus international level is, probably shouldn't do that. But I do think that he hasn't offered as much as his potential has suggested, if I can put it that way. So I see that number 7 jersey is open.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of less serious questions here then, Zach, whilst
Mhm.
we got you. The collars on the shirt, those massive white collars, it looks like they're wearing kind of a smart dress shirt underneath their shirts. Is that just me being ridiculous, or do they look a little odd to you?
I honestly, I love the white collar
Okay.
shirt, and only because I sort of think back to it's
Jonah
historically
Lomu.
there has been that, yeah, the white
Didn't
collar
he?
shirt.
They
So
wore the white collar shirts, didn't they, Lomu's team?
yeah, yeah, they
95.
did.
But
So yeah,
they were a lot smaller collars. I don't know. I'm being ridiculous here. It just looked like massive shirt collars, but
there's been a lot of feedback on that.
yeah.
So you're probably not alone in terms of not liking it. But yeah, I personally like it because of the history behind it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I do remember that classic. Was it 1995
Yeah.
white collar, all black shirt? That was great. And the other thing that I noticed, which I'm sure I'd noticed before, but it was just reinforced to me when they're kicking. So when England are kicking, the whole crowd is booing. Not that
Mm.
I think that should put them off because kickers zone out anything that's going on. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, what they do. But is that something that has always happened? Why have I just suddenly picked that one up? Is it a southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere thing? Because you know there doesn't tend to be booing in the northern hemisphere as much. I certainly would never dream of booing anyone ever. Is that just
Mm.
me being a bit soft? Is it a cultural thing? It was just interesting. I didn't mind it too much.
Yeah, it's the new thing actually. Like
Okay,
I think yeah, New Zealand is always sort of, especially New Zealand supporters have always been known as sort of the quiet supporter.
well that's what
And
I
and
thought.
yeah, and rugby sort of supporters have generally been respectful. So yeah, I've noticed that the last couple of years probably is a little bit more booing, and I just think it's a sign of these sort of recent rivalries that we're seeing. And there's just a little bit of spice in some of these rivalries. I mean, everyone sort of talks about the All Blacks having the major rivalry with South Africa, but that's sort of a mutual respect rivalry. There's a lot of mutual respect between the two teams. When the Northern Hemisphere teams come down, the likes of Ireland or England or even France to some respect, there's just a bit more pepper in
Okay,
a bit more spice
yeah. Look, I
in the rivalries.
don't get me wrong. I
So
actually don't mind it, to be honest. I don't think it affects the kicker at all. But I just noticed it a lot more than I think I had in the past. It was
yeah,
just an interesting one.
yeah, me too. And as I say, I just think there's that little bit more spice in the rivalries of sort of recent age. So I don't know. I'm
Okay.
not a fan of it myself, to be honest.
No, no, it was just interesting. Okay, just to finish off then, if we were to give a grade on Scott Robertson's first outing last week, what would you give it? Say, I don't know, out of 10, say.
Out of 10, I'd probably give him a 6. I mean,
Okay.
he got the win. That's important. It was a nervous win. Um,
Where do you
but
think
there's
they were
just sort of,
nervous then?
oh, I thought he was definitely nervous. He was sort of pacing in the coach's
Okay,
box,
yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah. So that's not normally his style then.
Not normally his style at all. He's normally
Hmm.
quite calm and measured. But I mean, it's his first game, first introduction, so fair enough. I think I think a bit has been made about the rush defense, particularly in the second half. I actually think they lost their way with Pedofeta going off. So I do think that's one sort of area that if you're going to bring in Bowden Barrett, well, obviously you bring in game management, which is important at the end of the game, but you might lose a little bit of spark to get around the rush defense. So
It was
that's
interesting
one
that one,
area.
wasn't it? Because it was a kind of a substitution just to get him on, rather than that Perifetta was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. They kind of it's like
Yeah.
like shoehorning him on for the sake of it, maybe.
Yeah, and then it became sort of a kick heavy approach for the All Blacks. So he's got to get that style right and that balance right. I do think he's got the players to do it. It'll just take some time to embed his style.
So just finishing off in the outside backs because we haven't touched on them yet.
Hmm.
Have they got enough power? Do you think? I mean, Reece and Talaya were outstanding as they always are. Question marks in the centres, maybe. Do they need a bit more power? 13, is that still a question mark? Does Clark need to come in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to say the Ollie in your team, Ollie Lawrence, he made them look light. I mean, big defensive effort, and just he's quite a strong carrier of the ball as well. So I thought, yeah, it stood out that they looked quite light there between Barrett and Ioane. Now, a lot has been made about Rieko Ioane's position recently as well, and whether or not there's sort of question marks now about whether or not he has rights to that jersey. I do think he should remain in the jersey for now. But those questions will become louder and louder if we don't see his
Okay.
performances.
So would you change the back line at all, or the bench at all? Fantastic. All right, Zach, that was amazing. Thank you very much. Great to get a Kiwis insight into the All Blacks, and we see how they'll go on Saturday. Will they step it up another gear, and will it be too much for England? Be fascinating to see. And yeah, do go over to Hacker Time, check out Zach's stuff. It's always awesome. And thank you very much, Zach.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me on.